This is the Alpine KTP-445U 4-channel compact speaker amplifier. I'm here to tell you why I don't really like this amp very much. So what is there to know about the Alpine KTP-445U? Odds are, if you've looked at upgrading your system at all, you've heard of or researched this particular amplifier. It is just over the size of a dollar bill, obviously not in thickness, but it's a very compact 4-channel amplifier that promises 45 watts RMS at 4 or 2 ohms. You can also make this a 2-channel amplifier if you so choose, and its compact size means that it can fit in a variety of spaces, under your seat, inside your dash, all sorts of things. And there are a lot of great features to this that make it possibly something worth looking at. You obviously have your front and rear gains. Your typical, you use a flathead screwdriver in order to adjust the gains. I have them set for the radio that I just pulled them out of. Right here it says what it's rated for, 45 watts RMS times 4. And then you have your dip switches that are responsible for setting your high-pass filters. So you can set the frequency either to 60 Hertz, 80 Hertz, or 120 Hertz. It's your choice. So, it's compact, it packs a punch. On top of that, only being fused at 15 amps means that in a variety of stereo installs, you can actually use your existing wiring. You don't have to run this cable to your battery, for instance, or your ground. You can just tie into your radio's ground. And that's great and all, but some of the things about this unit I don't particularly care for. Now, I've had this unit for probably 2 years now, so I do have a lot of experience with this amp, and that's why I'm making this video. I bought it because I viewed it as a good choice at the time, but let's go into some of the things that I don't like now that I've told you some of the things that make this a very appealing option to those in the market. So, the compact size of the amplifier is one of the things that made me want this amp in the first place. But I have found that its particular size is one of the things that I'm not enjoying very much. I have an Impala, and there's plenty of space behind the radio, but one of the problems with this particular amplifier is that it's the chassis is the exact width of a single or doubled-in radio. And when you take into account that there are connectors sticking out from either long side of the radio, you don't have space to fit those connectors in. And so you can't actually fit it in, say, my Impala. It won't fit. And I'm left with either burying it in the dash or having it on the floor somewhere under the dashboard, and I really would kind of just like to hide this with the rest of my gear. And I can't do this with this amp. If it was more of a square shape, that wouldn't really be a problem. The other problem with this amp, it does put out 45 watts RMS at 1 kilohertz test tone, but when you get into some of those lower bass frequencies, it starts clipping. So if you set your gain at 1 kilohertz and you plan on running this as a full range amplifier, you're going to run into problems, because when it's hitting those lower bass notes, you're either going to have to adjust your gain down and test it at like a 40 hertz test tone, set your gains from there, or you're going to have to adjust your EQ, and that really makes this a better choice if you're wanting to power your speakers and go with a separate sub amp. And that brings me to my last thing, which is, yes, you can tie into your head unit's stock power supply in a lot of cases. Sometimes you can't, though, because some units are only fused at 10 amps, and you don't want to tie a 15 amp fuse in that scenario. You actually need to run a dedicated wire to the battery and such. But for 15 amp radios, that's perfectly fine. But it's almost like, since you're going to be running a wire to the battery for your subwoofer anyways, it would almost make sense to just get a distribution block and go with something like like a tar amp's 4-channel amp that's more of that square shape. It's I believe it's a little bit thinner, and it puts out more power. If you're already having to run a wire to the battery to make this work in a system like that, it just really doesn't make any sense. This doesn't really work as a 4-channel amp, unfortunately. You will have to set the it's nice that you are able to set the crossovers, but I mean, it doesn't work as a true 4-channel amp, I guess is what I'm saying. So I guess that's why ultimately I don't like it, especially for the $170 that I believe Alpine was MSRPing this when it was new. Granted, I did not get it for that. I think I got it for around 120, but still, even then, there are some decent amps that you can find for 80 to 100 bucks that fit the bill as far as having a small form factor and putting out more power than this amp can. This amp has been out for a while, and it's just kind of fallen behind on the times. And yeah, so I personally would pass on this. But you may like it. I did like it because I was planning on adding a subwoofer anyways, and so utilizing the crossovers was simple, and it blended well once I got everything figured out. But when I just had this amp, because it was one of the first things that I bought before I added a subwoofer, it really wasn't working out. I had to have the gain turned down almost all the way, and that's not utilizing full power of the amp. Anyway, I hope you found this video informative. Like and subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment down below. Nothing offensive. Have a wonderful day. And before I forget, there's another reason I don't like this amp, and it has to do with the RCA inputs. In order to do high-level inputs, let's say you don't want to change out your stock radio and you just want to run this, you're cutting off the RCA ends. That's how you get high-level inputs on this. So if you wanted to change this to another vehicle, or you ended up going with an aftermarket unit in the future, you'd be stuck using high-level inputs unless you happen to keep those RCAs around and splice them back on. And I don't feel like in a lot of cases that's what people are going to be doing. So you don't have separate inputs. It's you either run low-level inputs or you run high-level, pretty much, unless you're that organized, and I know I'm not, so that's another mark for me.